I don't know. You are live. Thank you. Welcome to the Vermont House Appropriations Committee. It is Thursday, February 9th, 2023, 8:30. We have with us the distinguished guest, Dr. Harry Chin. Okay, interim commissioner of DCF and associated people to walk us through their DCF budget, which is a big piece. Later on today, we're going to hear from the Department of Mental Health. And after that, we have then completed through the AHS budgets, first time. Now that I've testified in Senate on the BAA and had a nice Tuesday, Wednesday, now I'm starting to totally dig into FY24 and starting to feel the angst of time and what we have to do. So there's a work with Aaron to take a look at our budgets. I'm looking to get every budget in before the 24th of this month, or at least coming through the first time. Committee, we haven't finished the language piece. We need JFO to walk us through the language piece. And I don't know how often that when you're meeting with your budgets, are you talking about the language parts in the budget that coincides with those budgets? Don't know. We'll get a handle on that. I also want to figure out, I want to have JFO walk us through the letters that goes to the agency. Might be a little bit like closing the barn door after we've done some work, but I don't know if everybody here has spent any time looking at the letter that we send to agencies saying, this is what we expect you to bring to us, or when you're talking with them. So I want to make sure that you have some eyes and ears on that, as well as yesterday and today be working on the letter that's going out, hopefully the end of this week, to the standing committees with a really minted format that was worked up with Ledge Council and JFO to hopefully make it even easier and clearer for standing committees to respond to us. So I'm asking for a March 1st date back to us for their letters, so that would be the final week before town meeting. Then the week after town meeting, we're finishing up our budget. We're going to have a lot of big bills. That's the colliding storm that I see brewing, or, that are going to be coming our way that that are going to land in the middle of our table. So we'll juggle all of the above. Okay, that enough said for the morning. Oh, also JFC is meeting at noon. Oh, the three of us need to be at that today. And there's a bill on the floor at 3 that I have a feeling might have some roll calls. We're here, and after doing some dancing around, depending on what version of the agenda you're looking at, 3 o'clock ADS is going to move from yesterday at 10 to today at 3. And then we can have a good block of time for the discrimination training tomorrow after floor, depending on how long floor is. So we've got a good block of time. If we need a filler in there, we can I'll ask JFO to walk us through the letters. All right. Sort of a plan. Let me know. All right. Let's invite our first witnesses up. Who's coming in? This is Representative Holcomb's budget areas, DCF. So as much as we will ask you questions today, we will filter questions through her from us so that you don't have 12 of us emailing you, that you have Rebecca. Representative Holcomb, sorry, my bad.
Rebecca.
Welcome. We did introductions before. Are you feeling comfortable, or would you like us to do that again?
I think we're fine.
All right, so with that, sir, we have you for many hours. We're hoping to take a break at 10 or somewhere close to that at a good point, for a couple minutes, and so we can sustain ourselves through your riveting testimony.
All right, so good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair. I guess we should feel flattered by the amount of time we get to spend with you today. I'm joined by Katerina Lazias, Senior Advisor, and Megan Smeaton, the Chief, I call her CFO, but she has a different title, I'm sure.
Financial Director for it.
Financial Director. In an effort to minimize the questions that go back and forth, I've asked Deputy Commissioner Radke from Family Services to join us and Deputy Commissioner Miranda Gray to join us from CDD. So hopefully we'll be able to answer more of the questions in real time rather than have the back and forth.
Excellent.
So again, for the record, Dr. Harry Chen, Interim Commissioner of DCF, and I wonder if I could, let me see, share my screen. Okay. Up there? Okay.
Go.
All right. Thank you. So, just to start off, just some general facts about the budget. Again, understanding the mission of the department in terms of being part of Agency of Human Services, fostering a healthy development, safety, well-being and self-sufficiency for Vermonters, goals of reducing poverty and homelessness, improving the safety and well-being of children and families, creating a permanent connection for children and families, and providing timely and accurate financial supports for children, individuals, and families. The budget that we're presenting to you this year, FY24, includes a 41% increase to general fund and a 3.3% increase to global commitment. Understanding that the bulk of our budget is the general fund with a healthy proportion of both federal funds and the global commitment. The major initiatives that we will share with you today related to our budget include a ENMI inflationary factor, private non-medical institute inflationary factor to address the sustainability challenges of many of our partnering agencies and programs, a youth development program that has been in place, but we are planning to continue it. Child care expansion in the CDD arena, increasing use and costs related to children's integrated services, and a early intervention 0 to 5 program, and in economic services, the GA emergency housing program that I think many of you are familiar with, but carrying it out into fiscal year 24. In terms of Reach Up, a Reach Ahead pilot, 2-year pilot, which is a program that allows transition from Reach Up to economic independence, and funding for Act 133, which was Reach Up. Reach Up changes from last year. In terms of our budget, the admin really there's the normal pay act, retirement increases, and really travel savings. And there are really 2 items I would bring to your attention. One is a administrative position for the child care proposal, understanding that there's a great deal of administrative work related, specifically related to budgets and contracts and grants, that for us to be able to be efficient in our dispersing of those funds with the expansion associated with our initiative, we need additional capacity. In addition, we've included $100,000 for refugee cash assistance program. It's a federal benefit to help eligible adult refugees who do not have minor children with 12 months of cash assistance. The families are supported through the traditional Reach Up program, but these are not families, individuals without families. Typically, 1/3 of the refugees register for the program, and it's estimated that 108 recipients will receive have received this, will receive this in FY '23.
Go ahead, Representative Shea.
This, if I'm reading this right, it's 100,000 to give them 12 months of cash assistance. If there's 108 people,
That is 23 numbers, and I think our estimates are based on 24 numbers, and I do not know what the 24 numbers are.
well, so how much is 12 months of cash assistance? What does it equal in dollars?
Yeah. So this is a unique program that actually I might phone our friend Rich because it's administered by the AHS Central Office and DCF is in partnership with that. So these, Tracy Dolan is the director of the program. So she will, or we can either phone Rich or we can follow up with information from Tracy about those overall numbers.
So for the record, Rich Delahaye, CFO of AHS, I think it would make most sense if you would agree, Madam Chair, to meet with Tracy Dolan, the program director.
We can, yeah, great.
Use current numbers, that's like less than $1,000 for a year, which is 12 months of cash assistance.
Is that $100,000 total?
No, it's an increase.
Increase.
Oh, so what's the?
I think that's your,
Yeah.
she was just dividing 100,000 by,
That would be.
By 108.
We're only a component of the program.
okay.
But it comes through the door through.
We issue the benefits out as part of our like e-cash that goes out the door, but it's an IDT program for us, an interdepartmental transfer, and the programmatic portion flows through A's.
I can check with my colleague who has that in their budget, so we'll do that.
And I think in addition to that, do you have administrative capacity for that? Because it sounds like you're the banker for dispersing cash services, and that's part of the overhead challenge.
It's it goes through, I think it doesn't create a huge additional workload. It's just issuing more benefits every month.
Did I hear them correctly that they're doing this through Reach Out?
The families are provided cash assistance through Reach Out.
So it's an addition to their Reach Out, which is why it might not.
No,
No, it's a parallel program for individuals who do not have families.
Right. So they're the ones who get this. The ones
Refugee
with
cash.
families already have the Reach Out.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have an estimate of, I'm sorry.
No, sorry.
I'm
go
so
ahead.
sorry. Chair Winfrey, may I speak? I'm so sorry, working on my behavior here. Do you have an estimate of what proportion of your administrative positions in this pie chart are required federal match? Or is that?
For the admin support services, I can get you a more specific number, but a lot of the positions in the administrative are commissioner's office or business office, so they work on a lot of federal programs, so they leverage federal dollars to a larger extent than some other agency divisions might.
And you're looking for one position in the childcare proposal.
Right, related to the childcare. Again, if we are increasing the eligibility of the CCFAP, we're increasing the workload of bringing in programs, bringing more people and bringing in more programs.
If I just may add to that, one position in the
There,
administrative.
exactly. That was what I was just gonna say, one position here. The others scattered through. Representative Holcomb?
So I was going to wait until you got to that section, but I'll ask it now since you mentioned that, Commissioner Chen. When you expand the eligibility, we're going from a program that supported a fraction of students who are accessing childcare to a program that supports the majority of students, young people, not students, children in the state. Have you evaluated? There's got to be a cost inefficiency associated with continuing the current model of delivery when it goes from a small program to a large program. Did you have internal conversations when coming up with this proposal about the cost of regulating in this current construct as opposed to thinking of a more inclusive program? that didn't have as much verification. Is my question making sense? There's a tremendous amount of cost associated with continuous verification, that if this was an open program, you wouldn't have to verify anyone. And I'm wondering if where that sugars out, and is there a threshold that we should be thinking about?
I think what we did for the initiative is build it upon where we already have federal funds. So we do receive federal funds for the CCFAP program, which was part of our calculation for the initiative. Not sure if.
Yeah, and maybe I didn't ask my question. So we have to, for federal dollars, we have to go through those verification procedures. But for students who aren't federally eligible, there's now a new cost associated with the verification to Vermont imposed.
I guess CCFAP has already served people outside of the federal requirements, so we're just continuing that methodology.
I understand that. Have you evaluated the cost of using that methodology, which is a federal methodology?
I guess what I'm saying is that's not how we built our initiative. I don't think we've done the internal things. Yeah.
Representative Harrison.
So I'm not sure if this is the right place to ask or not, but I met the other day with our regional parent-child center. And they're asking for an increase in their base budget. And I'm not sure where that fits in, and if they talk to you about building it in here, or is this part of the child care assistance increase, or is it not even on your radar?
So I'd say maybe we can just wait till we get to the Child Development Division part of the budget, and obviously that is part of that budget.
Okay, thank you.
Is it as helpful, the admin services appropriation is B316?
Oh, thank you. Page 316?
It's the pink on this chart.
Yeah. I think so, sir.
Okay, all right.
So the next area I want to present to the committee is our Family Services Division, obviously working in partnerships with families, communities, and others to make their children are safe from abuse. Their basic needs are met, and they're free from delinquent behavior. And in this Family Services budget, again, the usual increases. In our BAA, we had our crisis staffing contract for half the year. We've put it in our 24 budget for the full year, again, reminding the members that this is a contract to provide staffing for high needs youth who are not in a facility or who are not currently in a foster setting or residential facility, and require today staffing by Family Service Division social workers, sometimes also law enforcement in cases where we're worried about individual and or public safety. And this would relieve the pretty significant burden from the FSD workers to actually staff these individuals while they're being stabilized, while they're being transitioned to a different program.
Go ahead, Representative.
Just wanted to get some clarification. My gratitude to you all, because I know you've had pretty significant understaffing and vacancies throughout the pandemic. Are you seeing them concentrated in certain divisions within DCF, and is this one of those?
I'd say overall, this is one of the areas. One of the challenges is because we have all these district offices. Not all districts are the same in terms of vacancies, and so some of them have higher vacancy rates. I think that we're having an adequate family service workers capacity is key, and so we are implementing incentives and other programs to try to both encourage people to come on. And obviously, I think there's a lot of interest in how we achieve retention. So we're doing stay interviews with workers as well as exit interviews because we have found that sometimes it's not hard to hire individuals, but it's hard to keep them.
So what have you learned from the exit interviews about the needs of your staff? We depend, like everybody depends on this division in the state in ways that many of us don't appreciate. What are they telling us that we need to know?
Well, I think not surprisingly, they're telling us that the work is hard, that having to transition from their normal work, which is being family service workers, to being residential care workers for high needs kids is adding additional stress to the job. And that is why we're creating this contract to help them, relieve them of that duty part of the time.
And is that, and using the external partner,
Right.
you doing a contract is because you don't feel like there's a way to actually hire staff to do a swing shift? Is that the logic?
Well, in the world that we envision, where we have a robust and healthy system of care, we would use the system of care to provide this. So whether it be providers, stabilization providers, whether it be a secure facility, which we discussed previously, that would be the system rather than having to staff people in alternative sites, using whether it be our workers or whether it be these crisis staffing contract.
So then this is a solution because the system is in crisis.
Right.
What does the healthy state look like? What would it look like if you were a robust system of care and you didn't need crisis workers?
What it would look like if you had let's just say, as an example, if you had a child in crisis, we have both staff secure crisis stabilization beds. We could move them to that where a contractor would provide the actual staffing for that child or youth. And if they actually required a higher level of care, we would have a hardware secure facility where they could be transitioned to and freeing up beds at the crisis level, right, staff level. Right now, we don't have that hardware secure facility, so there are definitely youth and children and youth who don't belong in many of these staff crisis situations so it's not the right level of care for them.
And I think you're coming back to that later in the presentation.
We are, right.
Yeah.
But also, in addition, this crisis staffing helps us fill the gap until we can get that robust system.
And just hop in case, because I know it's helpful, this is B17.
Thank you.
We're in B317,
The yellow on
the
It's the
Family
yellow
Services
orange.
Division.
It's the yellow orange on this sheet.
One quick question, please.
Yes,
This is a contract. This won't be
Correct.
state employees. These will be contracted positions you're looking at. That's the 688 here.
That's correct for a year, for the full year.
Thank you.
I mean, our goal would not to hire individuals to provide the service because we would like to use our system of care and the providers to do that. All right. There is a staff conversion with elimination of 15 centralized intake and emergency services temps and converting them to permanent centralized intake and emergency services positions. There's and it really the experience has told us that not all jobs and not all positions are temporary workers the most efficient way to achieve capacity, increased capacity.
we're gonna go 1, 2.
I'm just for clarity, I have been trying to track positions as we go through different budgets. And this is sort of maybe also a question for Rich, because I felt that he, in his HS admin, did an overview of all the positions, but I remember 6 permanent positions for childcare after school expansion, but not this conversion being named in the initial budget presentation. So that's what I'm just wanting to make sure that I'm not mixing
Correct, yeah.
apples and oranges in different bags.
I believe that was included in the DCF specific slide
Okay,
of the presentation.
Okay,
not in our very high level position overview.
okay.
Go ahead.
I actually was focusing on the same, I just need clarification. When you say we're eliminating 15 positions and converting CIS to 5 permanent positions, were there a total of 20? Are we, so we're taking
gap of
of the
10.
15, yeah, help me understand these numbers.
We have 15 temporary positions, and we're converting them to 5 permanent positions.
Okay, so you're eliminating 10. Okay, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't that there were a total of 20 and you were making 5 permanent and getting rid of 15. Okay.
Representative Dolan.
Good morning,
Morning.
and thank you for coming today. I believe it's my understanding that temps aren't full-time year-round. Don't they have a limited service maximum? So that replacing temps with permanent is actually accomplishing, improving the capacity for work.
And some of it also is the training. If you think about, if you have to actually train up an individual to do a job, who will A, work less hours and B, won't be there for an extended period of time, that's not a necessarily effective workforce strategy.
So it's just like a basic map, just so I understand too. Right now, there are 15 temporary people doing this work.
Mhm.
And you're going to eliminate all 15 and replace them with 5.
Mhm.
And
Permanent.
5 people can take on the work of 15?
Excuse me, Dr. Shin, may I?
Yes.
Erica Ranky, Deputy Commissioner for the Family Services Division. Actually, the director of the CIS program still would like to use a few temps filling in for the 5 positions, and she'd like that flexibility. So we will still have the 5 permanent positions, and I'm not entirely certain on the number, but I believe it's 4 temps that will continue to fill in, just so that she has enough full coverage because there's 7 hotline.
Yes, we aren't eliminating all of the temps. We are eliminating 15 and replacing them with 5, and then there will be a few temps remaining.
In addition, who aren't reflected here, but they're in your base budget. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I
Go
take
ahead.
it back? One of the things I'm just trying to understand is the movement between the Medicaid Global Commitment and General Fund. And I noticed in this category, there was also a reduction in, for the, where is it? It's for the total case management technical adjustment, it's DCF net neutral, but you're moving again from Medicaid DCF back to general fund, it looks like.
Is this related to the balance of restorative justice?
No, it just says TCM technical adjustment, DCF net neutral, and it's down in global commitment and up in general fund. We saw the opposite during the budget adjustment. Can you just help me understand what's going on here?
Yes, so this is, if you look in the admin appropriation, so the one we just.
I'm looking in family services.
Yeah, you'll see the opposite of this. So we are just changing which appropriation we are earning the revenue in. So if you look on the family services one, you will see that we're adding GF and transferring the Medicaid to the admin DEPT ID. But if you look in the admin DEPT ID, you'll see the opposite. So
It's just you're changing which department charges federal and which department charges general?
yeah, which appropriation we're able to earn the Medicaid in.
Okay.
So basically, TCM, targeted case management services, are services that we provide to families for them to connect them with services that they need. We can earn that Medicaid revenue in both our administrative support appropriation and our family services appropriation.
They go through this.
We want to align our budget with where we're earning it so that it reflects the actual revenue that we're able to draw in. And so this is just to reflect that we were able to draw in more Medicaid and admin last year and less in FSD. So it's just a new transfer.
I knew it was net neutral. I was trying to figure out the logic why one or not the other. Okay.
Let me ask this, because I know that this is the high level, these are the high level pieces. Is it your intent then, after we go through the high level, then to walk through the crosswalks? Or should we be looking at them simultaneously?
I would say I would leave it to the pleasure of the committee.
So I think it's, if we're looking at this, we'll go through the high level and then we'll go to the crosswalk. Okay, it's just to make sure that we capture all of that. All right, I just didn't want to,
Because we're all jumping back and forth between the two, trying to
Yeah.
figure out what they mean on the high level.
yeah,
So do you want to,
we'll stay with the high level so that we get this
Right,
sense
and
and
then
then
we
we're
can
going
go
to
back to the
translate that into the
Right.
crosswalk. Travel savings.
travel savings, in our BAA, there was the balance of restorative justice, increase in the contracts related to the conversion corrective from GF to GC. And there is a 1-to-1 GF to GC conversion for Lund substance abuse.
Then we can, yep.
The next item is again, the PNMI System of Care Rate Adjustment and Stabilization with a $1.9 million increase. And this includes an increase for inflation adjustment and conversion, 2.85 million GF to GC conversion for stabilization support. So throughout the pandemic and currently it's our efforts to again shore up the individual programs, the PMI programs, and within the system to ensure that they have the funds needed to provide the services. Again, there's obviously it's important to us that our providers have the funding they need to provide the services.
Representative Squirrel.
Yeah, if I may, I'd like to go back to the barge funding. I assume that this additional money is going to have sort of changes in the waiver, right? The reason what waiver. Is that a base or is that one time? Is that a base change?
This is the base change.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. The next item is the caseload adjustments to align with prior year trends. So there's a down in subsidized adoptions and an up to subsidized care. Oh, there's a question.
Representative Mahoney.
In BAA, did we approve payment?
No, we didn't.
Approve that.
No, the bonus.
No.
There was a desire to like take a look at the entire foster
We didn't.
rate.
Okay.
Thanks.
So this is, again, illustrative of the current caseload and the trends. And in terms of DCF custody, conditional custody, and family support. And over the past year, it's relatively stable.
Yep, looks like increase in that area. Representative Dickinson?
What happened, excuse me, what happened in between 19 and 20? I mean, 20 was the pandemic, and it seems like there's been a decline. What to account for that?
I'm going to turn maybe to Deputy Commissioner Radke. What was that question? She wonders why the decrease between FY 19 and FY fiscal year 20.
But that was due primarily to the pandemic, since we didn't see as many children coming into custody, and I think that had a lot to do with youth and families being isolated. And there wasn't a great opportunity to make those calls because our typical mandated reporters weren't necessarily having an opportunity to put their eyes on children to make those reports. And then you see that it did then go back to
Yep, that's exactly what I was just thinking, that it's pandemic related.
Yes.
And also the courts, we heard that there was back.
I mean, traditionally, whether it be doctor's offices or schools or childcare centers, those are the mandated reports.
Yeah, the question then becomes, as we get out of 2022 into 2023 and going forward, does that mean we're going to see an increase to the prior pandemic levels that we that were higher? Or are you not sure about that?
As what I can tell, talking to the workers in our field, we don't think it is going to go back up. We think it's going to tend to stay steady. And that may also be due to some of the practices we're trying to implement with the Family Services Enrichment Act. We're really trying to prevent children from coming into care by doing more supports and services prior to that critical point. So that's an initiative that we're really beginning, but we're trying to get some traction with it. So I don't anticipate another spike in this.
Okay, thank you.
But who can tell?
You don't know, but yeah, but you're open, yeah, okay.
We also have a lower population too of children. So as
That's right.
that decreases, there's, yeah.
I mean, obviously, the ideal is to have a system.
Zero.
No one is in it.
For the right reasons.
For the right reason.
The right reasons, yeah. Thank you.
So as I mentioned earlier, the youth development program, it's one-time funding to support DCF FSD's transition and aftercare services through statewide youth development program supporting youth aging out of the foster care system. The last 2 years, the youth development program received one-time federal pandemic relief funds that are coming to an end. $1 million will sustain the program at the same level for another 2 years. So it's 8 local nonprofit agencies will use the funding to provide independent living stipends to youth aging out of foster care and case management.
Representative Shai?
I don't need to know all 8, but what are the local nonprofits that do this? I'm just wondering.
I'm happy to send you the list. I just don't have it in front of me. Erica, I'm not sure if.
I don't have it in front of me.
But it ranges from parent-child centers to like youth services in Windham County to a variety of community-based services.
I see only 8. So we're
Right,
not
so-
covering the state with 8.
They do. They just have different districts. Yeah, regions that.
Yeah, I'd love to see that list.
I would imagine
Thank you very much.
Spectrum's got
I believe so.
I believe so, but I don't know.
I guess.
Okay.
So this is a program that we started during the pandemic, right? No.
We had an increase during the pandemic,
Had an increase.
one-time funding. And this is another round of one-time funding, so it's not on the UP You won't see it in our UP but it maintains that pandemic level assistance.
I think it's about a $2 million program in regular federal funds. We had this one-time money that increased it to about $500,000 per year. And this one-time funding would continue it at.
Another 2 years. I'm not saying it's a bad choice. Sometimes we get like, oh, but it's coming to an end and you've got to stop continuing it. So it's just keeping good track of where there are good things that we invested in that resulted in positive things after the pandemic that we want to see happen, like our ability to Zoom and communicate that was.
I can add something to that. Part of the reason why we're moving this, why we're proposing this is because the YDP programs do help youth stay in housing or stay connected to workforce. So there is a lot of that prevention efforts that we look to as a department that can be sustained in this program with this funding.
And stabilizing the. Thank you.
One quick question.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Somewhere along the line in the past couple of years, it seems like there was an effort to raise the age for foster care release when they age out. It was 18, but a lot of them are still in high school at 18 when you talk about the educational. Has that gone up or what is the status of that?
I've been thinking of raising age in terms of our justice related.
Right, but
That was to 20.
Cohorts. I haven't heard anything in terms of fostering.
yeah, I remember that. Actually, we were talking about that when I was in the legislature, but I don't know where it is right now, but we could perhaps find that out for you.
Yeah, because they aged out at a point that was really not conducive to maintaining education 18 beyond. Right. Thank you.
I'd like to add, I agree with you, and that's why the YDP services have been so critical for that transition stage to try to get the children emerging adults more normalcy and to get them on a better path to adulthood.
Thank you.
Representative Mahali.
How long are kids subsidized with the program? How long?
How long are the kids, the youth subsidized in this program?
So how long do they receive subsidy?
You know, usually at age 15, they will age out, but we do have programs where we can ask them if they want to come in for additional. I have to double check, but I believe it's 2 more years for assistance and it's voluntary on their part.
All right.
So this is
One of the things, I'm sorry to interrupt you, because we have guests and on the, I've never had to ask this of any of us before, but speaking up, our microphone's a little further away. Sometimes people who are listening in can't hear us. So we'll be a little louder.
So maybe the two of you could pull your chair closer.
And and our guys here,
I can hear you better.
Of course they can.
Yeah, if you want to pull your chair to the table, you're welcome to do so.
Breakfast now.
They want to go through the whole section.
Oh,
And then go
back.
fast.
Okay.
All right, so this, anticipating some questions related from previously. This is the Child Development Division, in terms of improves the well-being of children, Vermont children by developing a continuum of high-quality, comprehensive child development and family support services that promote health and well-being, school readiness, and foundations for lifelong success. For the typical pay act and retirement, there is a small operating savings, and there are, related to our child care initiative, 5 new positions. In addition, to provide the infrastructure to implement the other pieces of the initiative, which include the equity CCFAP payments of $4.9 million, the school age capacity increase in grants, $6.9 million, the CCFAP expansion to 400%, which is $41.5 million, and eligibility referral contracts of $2 million.
It's 41 million up.
Up.
Right, so what is its base?
our current base is 60, I'll get that for you, 67.8, I think.
And just to name, in your line item sheet, you'll see that the equity CCFAP payments are actually $400,000. We will be working with you to amend that because that was an error on our part. It was in the CCFAP, not in the right line. Yeah.
Okay, so it's and that's in the crosswalk when we get there, that's line item,
It's
that's,
a misallocation of the dollars.
all right, you'll highlight us when we get there. Representative, oh my goodness, Representative Shaw must be talking about me today.
Could you tell me what school age capacity is? I get the other ones, but I don't understand that one.
Good morning. For the record, Miranda Gray, Deputy Commissioner of the Child Development Division. Sorry, I know this is awkward. So the school age capacity effort is to bring more school age children into subsidized care. So we know that we have approximately 5,000 additional children by looking at the free and reduced lunch data that the Agency of Education holds that aren't accessing the program that we believe could. So this is specific to support families paying for care, after school care, school break care.
Okay, so these are for kids age 5 to what?
Up until they turn the age 13, although there are some exceptions, so it could go up to the age of 19 if a child had needs that qualify.
So this is basically after school and break care during the school year, and then they're kind of on their own during the summer.
So no, there could be summer. We are also working to bring more summer programs into accepting childcare financial assistance. Right now, they don't need to necessarily be a part of our regulatory system. And so we have an initiative with the Vermont After School. We are using our American Rescue Plan Act funds to be able to try to get more programs that would be adding capacity. So adding slots, as well as trying to get existing programs to accept CCFAP. So this is the money to actually help pay for these families to access the care.
Okay, and what you're saying is that you've identified 5,000 children who are not utilizing the program now
Correct.
that could.
Yes.
I would just like to clarify our budget for CCFAP currently is 62.8 million.
62.8. Good. Representative Holcomb.
Is that 5,000 exclusive of the students who are enrolled through the 21C program at the Agency of Education?
So it would include, so when we have been looking at the school age population through Summer Matters, when the Agency of Education had ESSER, and I apologize, I'm not going to remember what the acronym stands for, but looking at how are we building our system together for the 21C programs, we know that we're not serving all the children between 21C, our regulated system of care, and then there's other systems that children could be accessing, like the Boys and Girls Club, that might not be either one of those.
So 21C used to support both private and public providers, and I know it is a federally funded program that had excess capacity. I also know that in the Summer Matters program, the programs that serve students with disabilities and provided transportation were all public school programs, which mean, and the others were not. And I wonder if you're paying attention to equity of access, number one, because that inherently segregates our system of summer learning and summer care. So I would argue that state funding is driving segregation right now in the state of Vermont. And I wondered if you evaluated the pros and cons of participating with the 21C program as opposed to dispensing it through and creating capacity. That's the first question. I have a number of other questions on this matter.
So I know that we are looking at the overall system and wanting to make sure that it's accessible for everyone. And it is in partnership with 21C, my understanding, but certainly I don't have a broad depth and would be happy to connect with the Agency of Education. But is that the 21C program does have capacity, that they don't have the ability to support everyone. And it's like a tapering program. So they start off with more funding, and as you become an established program, it becomes less funding.
Well, isn't that analogous to capacity? That capacity grants are not ongoing grants.
Right, it does help them.
So this is mirrors. And how does this build on the capacity building? You know, so I'm looking at the number of slots. Have you actually seen an increase in the number of slots associated with the capacity grants that were already issued using the federal funds in the Summer Matters program?
So yes, there is data that I would be happy to give you. There was additional capacity created through that.
And do you also have data on unique students served? So when capacity is one thing, actual service is a very different number sometimes. And do you have data on that?
I will find out and then get back to the committee.
And just on this one more, I know that we lost a tremendous amount of school age care several years ago when we decided to dual regulate school-based programs. And is this being rolled out with consideration of that as well?
Right, that's a part of our efforts with Vermont After Schools to help engage those programs that are existing to accept CCFAP. As I mentioned, they don't have to. The school-based programs don't have to accept CCFAP, but we want to help support families that would need assistance and these programs to have that.
Can you provide us the overhead costs of that contracting through Vermont After School as well? I mean, it's an additional overhead cost that then is going to affect the cost per child served. So I'd be curious to know that as well.
Thank you.
Can I keep going on this section?
We'll let him go. Yeah. You might, that might be something that you might want to take offline. You go into the depths of the program.
So the next item is really the children's tax credit, a tax checkoff, and instead of coming through DCF, it will go directly to the children's trust fund. Yeah, there is a increase in utilization for children's CIS, children's integrated services. Again, in early intervention, birth to 5, of 950,000, almost 951,000, based on our, I believe, based on the needs, right? Yeah, the increased needs. And then the removal of the baseline American Rescue Plan Act Stabilization Fund.
Okay.
Okay. So again, this is just outlines the child care expansion initiative, that the expansion will, proposed expansion will expand services to 4,600 additional children, including the expansion to 400% of federal poverty level, which would include a family of 3 with an annual income of $92,000 would qualify for assistance. The equity CCFAP payments with a corrected value of 4.9 million, which would establish that CCFAP payments are not tied to STARS rating, really, which ensures equity throughout the state, regardless of where they live.
Can I ask a question about that too? I really appreciate the willingness to look at the equity of using that rating. And, I believe that it is disadvantaging, particularly some rural communities. The national research suggests it's also disadvantaging communities of color. And I wonder if you'd considered factors that aren't related to geography, but are actually related to things like color and wealth of the community. Because the national data says we should be looking at that as well.
I don't know if that was ever.
I think that research contributed to why we're moving this initiative forward. I'm unsure of what we have for Vermont. I'm sorry to jump in.
I think you have that. And I think it is, we are looking at that all families would have access to the same reimbursement, regardless of where they live.
I appreciate your leading on that.
Additionally, the school age capacity, and rather than, I guess I misstated, I probably wouldn't call it a capacity grant. This is actually capacity to define and increase the subsidy for these 5,500 more school age youth in after school and summer programs.
It is an excellent program that from Aiden. I've witnessed it myself. It's really.
There's eligibility referral contracts, increasing the community care support agency contract to ensure the system can support the increased caseload, and 5 new positions to help with the increased number of families that will be eligible based on the changes.
So I thank you for and the attention to something that is a really, really big issue for Vermonters. As we hear about housing, childcare, those are the big issues that we're tackling, and you're bringing forward through the administration an incredible investment here, and we'll be but marrying with a lot of the thinking within this building and overall 2 bodies. So as this moves forward, I'm sure, as you probably will guess, that this will have some changes and some big changes to it as we start to marry all of those together. Does that? Okay. So as much as we need to understand it, that's great. I just want you to be aware of the fact that nice beginning. I don't know where we're going to end in the big picture of this, but we'll require all of your assistance as we try to weigh out some of those big changes. It's going to be a very interesting and year.
Right.
Last question.
Yeah.
Thank you for your patience with me. I know that at some point we'll be having to talk about this on the floor. I'm trying to understand the big policy logic, the theory of action that's just generally, and how it differs across the departments. So for example, Commissioner Levine came in and talked about the purpose being to build community capacity to respond to public needs, public health care needs. We've taken a very different approach in childcare where we're really not focused on community capability. It really is targeting individual subsidy and support. It's a very individualized model. And I wanted to ask about that because maybe it's the sector I'm in where we're really dealing with a lot of litigation at this point. And I know that in this context, we are subsidizing programs that are not inclusive. We've had cases where kids have been expelled from programs, where kids have been excluded because they have disabilities, where kids have to choose whether or not they have access based on very overtly homophobic missions of programs. And I'm trying to reconcile that with the Vermont constitutional obligation to support common benefits, not individual benefits. And I wondered if that came up in all of your conversations, not just because it's really a philosophical statement about when we subsidize programs, are they for the benefit of all Vermonters or not, but also because of the potential litigation we're going to see in the sector. We've seen it for years. They were already litigating around preschool when I was in office, and I don't think it's over. And I just wondered if you've had those conversations as we go into this.
So I'm going to look over to Deputy Commissioner Gray, but what I would really say is that there's clearly a delicate balance. We have to balance the fact that we need that capacity. We have a licensing system which potentially will provide some of that kind of oversight and regulation, but I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I think what you don't see in our budget proposal here are things that we are also trying to accomplish with our American Rescue Plan Act discretionary funds. So some of what you're talking about, programs suspending or expelling children, I think to their defense, I guess, a bit is sometimes they just don't have the resources that are necessary. And so we use our discretionary funds to increase our special accommodation grants, which provides essentially like a one-on-one for a child that might need that, or like an extra adult to help support a couple of more children in programs. So we did add capacity there. We are also in the process right now of going through procurement to bring in coaches for programs. So what do they need for support, and then where does that support exist, and how can we connect them to it? So it's not that they have to try to go and find that on their own, but that we're helping to bring that more to them. Because I think what we know right now as well is that childcare directors are often in classrooms, and so they're having to do these extra steps outside of their normal working hour days, and there's just so much that they can do. So we're trying to, as a department, bring more to them. And I'm trying to think of
I should clarify. I'm actually not talking about that because I've seen wonderful work in the facilities in my arena on that space. I'm talking about programs that overtly have a mission, or a handbook that claims that, they believe that if you're gay and lesbian, you're equivalent of practicing bestiality and incest. And that's what we're funding right now. And I wonder how you reconcile that with some of our constitutional commitments. So that's what I'm talking about.
Well, I don't know if you can answer that bit, but you.
It becomes a risk.
The question is like, do we actually fund them or do we not?
We do fund them. And the question is, if we expand this financially, are we expanding the risk?
Right.
That may be a question that's outside of your realm to be able to process. Maybe it's more, I'm not too sure. But a question to bring up.
I guess I'd say it's a important question, but it's very challenging to try to address that in such a diverse and primarily private system. But it doesn't mean you don't. But it may be a individual action rather than a statewide action. Thinking about that, where does it go? Does it go to the state and the regulations, looking at the bylaws, looking at the individuals who run a program? I don't know the answer to that. I think that's a pretty significant rabbit hole to go down in a system like this. That's just my own opinion.
Thank you.
I mean, it's not an issue for discussion and consideration.
I think the only thing that I probably will have is the STARS piece, only because we work so hard to get there, to get to a quality system that I would need a lot more understanding of like how going backwards on that is a good place.
Or maybe are you helping those with fewer stars to improve their quality at the same time that you're doing this?
Because it creates an inequity among That's unfortunate.
And the answer to that is yes. We are right now, so it will be being brought before LCAR, and I apologize once again that I can't come out with the acronym, but looking to provide more flexibility within the regulations. Because right now, our STARS program actually isn't best practice in Vermont. Although I think it still has a lot that we can draw from, like there are shifts, and so we are looking at how can we support programs more, and it's more about child-teacher interactions than it is about document all of the coursework that you've done over the last 3 years. So I think it is that coupling and using the same coaches to be able to help programs. What is it that you want to do? What do you need to work on? And what is that plan? And how can we help you achieve that?
So am I to take it then, it's not like a black and white no or yes, it's we know where you are, we're going to meet you where you are, and we're going to help you move through that continuum because we don't want to leave the system. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So again, kind of in response to your point about the fact that there's many things that are going on with childcare in the building, and there's a lot of interest, and I think we acknowledge that. I think you see before you a $56 million proposal that almost doubles the spending on childcare in Vermont, and so we're happy to present it to the committee.
And we're happy to work with you to get there.
And this is really just a bar graph which really shows the mix of childcare capacity by age group and where we currently are.
Representative Dickinson?
No, I'm just looking at the screen.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to?
Sometimes she gives me, I get a sense that working on a question, has a question.
I'm just looking at it.
Okay.
So this
All right.
is B19.
We're going to B319, the Office of Child Support, and really there is no significant changes other than the expected ones. Again, the Office of Child Support supports over 15,000 cases and 16,000 children, and collected dispersed $45 million in child support payments, understanding that child support is a key economic support for Vermont children and families. The next slide relates to the aid to the aged, blind, and disabled, AABD. And again, I don't believe there are any significant changes there. It's
There's none.
it's not. And there's some caseloads that are there. The next item is the General Assistance Program, Emergency and General Assistance, which provides emergency financial assistance to eligible individuals and families, which may include personal needs and incidentals, housing, fuel and utilities, medical, and burial costs. And this program provides the needs for many Vermonters, including those mentioned. The majority of the GA Emergency Housing Program is currently paid for by the federal ERAP funding that requires no match, but it is not captured within our SY24 base budget. The ERAP funding will run out before the end of 23, at which time the general fund one-time funding will support households that are eligible for emergency housing. And the 24 budget proposes one-time funding to support our emergency housing program, as well as the DCF adverse weather conditions policy.
Representative Scheid, Representative Harrison, Representative Holcomb.
I'm actually, I processed a little slower. I went back to 320, the AABD. We have no changes. We provide a financial supplement. So is the financial supplement staying the same in FY24 as it was in 23? Is what you're saying, despite inflation and the high price of everything that will have. So basically, they're getting cut, realistically, because what you bought eggs for a year ago isn't what you buy eggs for today. And
There was an increase in the program last year.
I'm sorry.
I'd have to double check.
Right, I think we'd have to get back to the committee with the kind of the benefit year to year.
Yeah, well, and Representative Holcomb has the details, so I can send that question to her, and she can, so we don't have to, you don't have to keep getting back to us individually as well, we can follow up with her, but, so I am concerned about that, and then that makes me think about where Meals on Wheels fits, and I know they've been struggling. Do you guys support Meals on Wheels, or is that just some other place altogether that handles that?
That's another, yeah, it's in AHS, but not DCF.
Where in the AHS?
I believe it's in Dale.
That would be.
Is it Dale?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great.
And we can follow up, but last year the legislature did appropriate additional funding to AABD.
Okay.
But we'll follow up.
If your level funding going down.
We have been able to draw in additional Medicaid in the past beyond what our budget
Yeah.
shows, which allows us to, support a larger budget by leveraging federal dollars. And so last year, we increased our baseline of our investment global commitment based off of that knowledge that we are able to leverage federal dollars more. So I think that's
And I'm sure you don't have in front of you is when the last time was you increased it before that, because maybe it was quite a number of years ago. I don't expect to have that information.
And AABD covers a different categories of people. So I believe, because we talked about this last legislative session, the previous increase was specifically for individuals in long-term care establishments, and that was only a few years prior to last year.
Which only captured a few of the people in this
Correct.
category.
Yeah.
So the rest of them haven't had an increase at all until last year, and now it's level funded, so.
Welcome, Representative Harrison.
On the emergency housing, I mean, my understanding is we've always had some sort of emergency housing. Those very cold nights, people that have had an unfortunate fire, a variety of reasons. You're suggesting one-time funding here. Kind of begs the question, shouldn't there be a portion of that as base? I know we all want to get to the point where we don't need it like we have it today, but how do we, are we kidding ourselves? If it was $7 million a year or 8 million, whatever that number was pre-pandemic, maybe it's 10 million a year, but that's kind of base funding. So I'm just curious as to why this is one time.
So I'll take a shot at it, but maybe Megan has something. I think a lot of it, the old GA housing funds were reallocated to the Office of Economic Opportunity. There obviously is a great deal of uncertainty about what will happen next year in terms of housing. And so that is why we've chosen to do the one-time funding, not be able to give you a good estimate.
Yeah, I think going off of that, it's more that we haven't had good data in a couple of years because of the pandemic.
Right.
And so it's hard for us to project once, the public health emergency ends and things roll back and different changes happen where we will land a year and a half from now. So I think this was sort of our way of saying, we'll take it 1 year, get some more data that we can actually use to project a better baseline and then approach it from that perspective.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's just we're making next year's job with budgeting a little harder if we've got to find 10 million now in base that's not here now as we use one-time fund to patch it until then. The other question I have related to this is I've heard numbers like the average rate being 145, 150 or more per night for those hotel rooms, which is probably not some of these properties that any of us would pay. Do you negotiate, go out to bid? I mean, I'm just astounded at how high that rate is. Maybe I've got bad information.
Our rate is around 141 on average per night. It is slightly different between the transitional housing program and the emergency housing program. We don't, the transitional housing program is a different, we pay a month in advance. It's a bit different of a policy negotiation there. I don't think we don't go out to bid for hotels.
No, and because we aligned the transitional housing program almost identically with the federal funding source, it didn't have that type of negotiation, but we do have a cap on the rate that we pay hotels, but similar to what you're raising, Representative Harrison, is that it's a pretty high rate.
Well, knowing some of the properties, it seems like a very high rate. I pay, when I stay here, a significant less than that for a nicer hotel room. I mean, this is Vermont. If it was New York City, I get it. You would, the real estate's pretty scarce, so that you would pay. Just trying to understand, you know.
Right, duly noted, but understanding that we still don't have enough rooms at that rate.
Right, there's not enough hotels. So let me just understand that this is one-time funding, a request for in here, for what Representative Harrison pointed out is an ongoing program.
Yes.
Oh, that's gonna not align
Maybe,
real well with
maybe
our-
not at this level, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I've got Representative Mahaly and then Representative Holcomb.
Forgive me in advance, I'm not an expert on this, but tell me, what's the amount of the one-time funding?
It is 26.38.
Okay, so here's my question. We just, in this committee and the BAA, approved $21 million to extend for 3 months the program. So that's $7 million a month. And that program, as I understand it, is pretty all-inclusive. So if there was a year of that, God forbid, but if there was, that'd be $84 million. So, and your program is 26. So who are you keeping in the hotels and who are you throwing out?
So this is, the approach is that it would be at the current emergency housing rules. So people are eligible for a certain number of days every year, depending on their circumstances. And then on top of that, there's our adverse weather conditions. So
a return to the prior rules before the pandemic and before the federal funds.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think one of the things to make sure that the committee knows is that the adverse weather conditions policy and how it would be implemented in this proposed budget would be the same approach that we did this year, which was a hybrid approach. Previous to the pandemic, we have the adverse weather conditions policy that was weather dependent, which meant if the weather met certain criteria that night, a person could get a room. We are still using that policy for the first month of the adverse weather conditions policy in the last month, but for the 3 months in between, we would have a person can get a room any night. So that this year, that was November 15th to December 15th, it was dependent on weather, and we'll return to that on March 15th to April 15th. But the months in between, so December 15th to March 15th, it's not dependent on weather. So a person can receive a night at any time during that and for the duration of that policy.
So the theory is, once you have a month of cold weather, you're just going to assume the next 3 months are cold weather. So, and is it as inclusive as to eligibility?
Yes, the adverse weather conditions.
I mean, in other words, will approximately the same number of people who are now in hotels, once the adverse weather criteria is triggered, would approximately the same number of people be eligible?
I think what we've raised in this discussion is that it's hard to predict who's going to be in the program next. When we were doing these predictions, I think we estimated about 1,400 or 1,500 households would enter during the winter months, with it being much lower than that when the adverse weather conditions policy is not in effect.
So this program really gives kind of open access during the winter, during the core winter months is what you're saying. Well, November, December, January, February, March, or something like that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Twing.
Sorry, I missed the beginning of this. I apologize. So I'm just trying to understand, to be clear, July 1, the 2,200 or so estimated people who are currently housed through the emergency program go where? Do they, what's the assumption of where they go between July 1 and November 15th?
If they're eligible for the program, they'll stay in a hotel or motel. If they're not, that's part of our work with OEO. That's part of our work with our $15 million general fund plan and part of the plan for the ARPA funds of what other supports can be built up to support this population.
I'm just thinking I don't know if this is accurate, but I think in Brattleboro we have, between our shelter system and the emergency program, we have something like 230 individuals housed. But we have still, despite that, 10 to 15 people who, perhaps by choice, perhaps by circumstance, are unhoused completely and unsheltered out on our streets. I'm trying to understand how we don't end up with a flood of people who are on the streets, fully, completely unhoused, given what I know of our shelter system is already at max. And so I hear you that there's some eligibility for some individuals within that, perhaps 2/3. But I feel like we're dancing around the fact that there is some population that is going to be unhoused, unsheltered, and unable to access any other alternative programs. Is that true? Do you think that that's true?
There will be people who don't meet eligibility.
So our program proposal in front of us is aware of the fact that there will be people who will be unhoused, unsheltered, and unable to access, and we're okay with that proposal. Or the governor's proposal is okay with that.
We also have teams of people that are actively working with the households that are in our transitional housing program to try to connect them to permanent housing.
But there's no housing in places like Brattleboro. I mean, there's nothing available at all right now. So I appreciate the effort, but there's no capacity to house them. So I just need to be really, really clear, like that, yes, the program contemplates and intends to house as many as possible, but recognizes it will not be everybody. Okay.
And is there, assuming that's the case, I understand, is there any internal work being done at the moment on trying to quantify what that unmet need is and how you would address that in some way?
I would say this is where we marry up our efforts to invest in housing and building housing and VHIP, because this is the population that needs to and can move from where they are into that location.
Right, so the answer to that is yes, we are, we're some of the data, we're having access to new data that will help us estimate what the gap is. We're also obviously, standing up, not DCF as more housing stock. That's another part of the budget. How many of those will come up back online? The VHIP program in terms of renovating units, how many, that's obviously a quicker way of getting units online. And we're trying to estimate, yes, we're trying to figure out what that gap is.
Representative Dickinson.
Yeah, on the next slide, it shows emergency housing, hotel, motel stays. It's a rather dramatic bar graph. It talks about money, but I'm going to hedge a bet that the increase on these two lines for 2020 on way up into the 21, 22. Those would include people. The increased spending.
Yes.
It emphasizes the money, but it also relates to the fact that it's a huge increase in the number of people. So the pre-pandemic goes on from 2013 and it's under $10 million. So it had fewer people. or acute chronic people, or how does that work? I mean, where do we get all these extra people from? How do we explain it? It was there for a while.
So the program pre-pandemic has the eligibility rules that we're talking about that would be implemented after adverse weather conditions this year. And so that is part of why that number is low. There's also fewer people in the program. So pre-pandemic, the largest number of households at any given night was around 200 to 300 people. Right now, we're seeing households that's about 1,800 per night that we're serving around the state, if not more. So that's part of the reason, and that occurred at the beginning of the pandemic when the state made the decision to open the doors so that people had a response to health and safety concerns. Last year, knowing that the number was still very high, DCF created the DCF Transitional Housing Program, which is also a pretty wide eligibility program, actually increase or even wider eligibility criteria than what was implemented when you talk about income. And because it aligned with the federal funding source. So the increase you're seeing is related to the pandemic. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention it's also related to the housing crisis that we're seeing in the state. So as we transition out of the pandemic and the pandemic response, using the same program to respond to the housing crisis is challenging because we do not have the same federal resources available to us to sustain the program in the way it has been during the pandemic.
So we have less resources, more people, bigger crisis of housing out there. We have a very, very bad storm of that doesn't seem to be breaking anytime soon, as much as we bring it online. I have Representative Bloomley, Representative Tolino. Okay.
Hi. I know this is, this is hard because it involves, there are so many things that have played into the scenario that we are facing now, some of which we haven't had any control over. What I've also heard in response to your question, Representative Dixon, is that, there were a number of people who never were kind of captured in a point in time count, who were living in somebody's basement or they were, couch surfing or whatever. And now we have probably a more realistic idea of who is without a home. And I think, I guess, and I appreciate the angst that, there is no perfect solution, and there are, frankly, it is going to require a host of strategies, as we've discussed in this committee before. I am wondering where in your budget is the money for supportive services that is tied to serving these folks? Has it gone up in this budget? I was trying to find that and couldn't, because I think that what we've learned is how important those services are in any progress towards moving people to permanent housing.
Yeah, I think when we get to OEO's budget, we can talk about some of the recent increases there.
Okay.
In addition to, again, some of the federal resources that we're relying on right now that have a longer spend rate than some of the other ones coming offline soon.
And I just have one quick follow-up. My assumption is that, given the discussions we had with the BAA, that within AHS and particularly DCF and OEO, there are fast and furious conversations with service providers to figure out what's Plan B come June.
Yes.
Sorry.
Absolutely.
I didn't hear it as a question. No, I'm just assuming, yes, and I just wanted that confirmation. Thank you very much.
Right, and I would just add that our ultimate goal is to have individuals in permanent housing, right? And since the pandemic, we have succeeded with 2,800 families, households. Even though obviously it's not reflected in these graphs, in terms of making a dent, that, there is success there, but obviously not to the degree we have, realistically, not to the degree we could actually hope for.
It's important to recognize this success, and I would never want to criticize. I know the stress that it's been on state employees everywhere dealing with an incredible crisis. Coming from the constituency and from our role, trying to figure out how to help to not let go of their hands. How do we help? How do we help go to the next level? I've got Representative Tolino and then Representative Dickinson.
So I'm coming back to Representative Dickinson's question about the curve and what shifted. And I'm just trying to so I have a question or two, but in just trying to make sense, make sure I'm accurate enough. So my recollection is that the point in time survey over the last decade has showed some 12 to 1,400, 1,500 individuals in any given year. Of course, many of those didn't necessarily meet the criteria for the program as it existed prior to the pandemic. So they wouldn't all have showed up in the metrics, or if they did in the winter, it wasn't necessarily always a big hit, and didn't capture that whole group and house them through this program because we used our shelter capacity and then there were gaps. We tolerated gaps in the old system. So I just want to make sure is that accurate or accurate enough in terms of understanding the pre-pandemic conditions as to why this GA emergency program might have sort of been averaging, I think you said 200 or something, versus the point in time survey, which showed that our actual homeless number was a much larger number than that. Am I making sense there? Is that?
You are. I think just the part I would want to emphasize is that, yes, the expanding of eligibility in the hotel and motel programs has allowed us to count households. That's absolutely accurate. I also think that it's aligned with there are an increase in population we're serving too. So it's not just that we weren't able to count everyone or it was challenging to count everyone. It's also there has been an increase. I think exactly where those meet or exactly where people were is a harder number to exactly pinpoint of why.
That makes sense, and I appreciate that because and the housing crisis and all these other factors have changed the dynamics, and it's not apples to apples, and I appreciate that. I'm talking with the executive director of Groundworks in Brattleboro, who's a personal friend of mine over the years. We've talked a lot about what it's like to be in a border community, and there's a public perception that we are attracting people who are attracted to Vermont services. And what he said from their data is that it is very rare for them to have somebody show up from out of state who has no direct connection to Vermont in some way. They come to a family member to stay with them, it doesn't work out. They have a relationship that falls apart, that there's a reason for them to be here, that it's not this abstract search for services. And I'm wondering, I don't know if you are tracking any kind of data, if you have any anecdotal reporting, but it feels like there is, at the state level, we're having some of that same conversation, that there's this instinct that it's not our people who have inflated those numbers, but rather there's been some influx of people as opposed to what I think I'm hearing from you, which is this is what was here largely, and we're just getting better access to the information about what the need was. And I don't know if you have enough data to address that question.
I guess what I can respond with is that we don't collect that data because the program, there's a Supreme Court decision, but we don't say, have you come from out of state?
Yeah.
So I don't think I can answer your question. I think anecdotally, we have heard that people have come from out of state. But exactly to your point, perhaps it's for a specific reason or not, but we don't have that data.
Okay, just a quick question. You constantly mention the federal money. Did the eligibility change with the federal money, and does the eligibility change occur when the federal money goes away? Is that what I'm hearing? Is that correct or not?
Yeah. So the eligibility has changed multiple times, but the most significant were the beginning of the pandemic. And we were able to leverage FEMA dollars that were specific to COVID spending. And then the next significant time that eligibility changed was when we created the transitional housing program that leveraged a different source of federal funding, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program funds, which is aligned with other rental assistance programs, but we have worked with our partners to figure out how we could serve this population with that source of funding. So the program runs itself with an occupancy agreement, which is similar to a rental agreement, and that federal source serves up to 80% area median income. So that was the next significant change in eligibility. But I'm just noting that it was a different program.
Yeah, but the question then is the federal money received, and
Yes.
we know it will. Will that eligibility then revert back to something else as it happened previous to this surge?
Correct,
Right.
yes.
Thank you.
Let me ask this, would it be safe to say that the rental assistance has kept this number from getting even higher? Because the rental assistance program is actually helping to keep them housed in the apartment or wherever they're at currently. And when it's a good thing because they're not becoming unhoused.
I would respond to, what we think at DCF is that someone not becoming homeless is the best.
Exactly.
However, we don't administer all of the rental assistance programs. So I think that DHCD or VSHA would be a better resource for that, because I don't want to speak for them or speak inaccurately.
But it would make sense to me to think that we've got a program, maybe not through you, but we have a program that's helping because of federal supports with rental assistance in a time when rents are going up or people's leases and things we're seeing. We've got a lot of Vermonters and that are in a really, really bad place, but of no fault of their own, particularly that's helping to keep them from not becoming one of this population. Yeah.
Right, and obviously this is the safety net.
Yeah.
And there needs to be a lot of other activity beforehand.
Before it gets here.
To prevent homelessness, and also to house people who are unhoused. And there's a lot of the federal dollars that are going away are being spent on those programs, for rental assistance, for bridge, or this, in our VAA was CARES voucher to kind of bridge to the federal vouchers. And then, prevention, homelessness prevention is obviously an important piece of it.
Okay, I think after this one, why don't we take a break when we get to
You're reading my mind.
3 squares?
Break.
She can't see your hand when it's raised, but she can read your mind.
All right,
It's actually pretty fast after this one.
yeah.
And this,
Why don't we just finish this up?
Yeah, we've got the other data sheet and then 3 squares and reach up. Picking reach up might spark a lot more as well.
Okay.
You have a very, very interesting and fascinating budget, so
I would absolutely.
so much to it. It's so much. All right.
This is just demographics on the emergency housing program, both the transitional housing, GA. And then this is 3 squares, and there's not significant changes in the 3 squares, our budget for 3 squares, but it really is important to let this committee know that there would be a pretty big change that will happen in ending in February, but the last payments will be in March, where there was a maximum benefit allotment all through the pandemic. Individuals, so Vermont today has issued $175 million in emergency maximum allotment. So the vast majority of people, 29,000 or so, received additional $95 in their allotment. But there are other families, a smaller amount that I think that goes all the way up to $2,000, and obviously very large families. So this will have a significant impact to Vermonters in terms of food insecurity. No question. We obviously, and we're doing a lot of work in terms of mass mailings. So we just released a press release. Be happy to share what we've been trying to share with the legislature, some points about what's happening and some alternatives, which some of the alternatives might be reassessing benefit levels, but also obviously food shelves and other sources of food and nutrition.
March is the last of these.
Right, that's the last.
Kind of maximum benefit. So it's I'm just seeing it also align with the same thing in April. We start the unwinding of the Medicaid redetermination is going to hit, and this is going to hit, and so warm up your phones.
Yes, all of us.
Yes. Yeah, it would be good before this comes about. We've got a, I mean,
We have a sheet of talking points.
have a really good handle on the response before it hits. Town meeting week is coming, and it's a good time to be able to highlight some of the changes that are coming. Okay. Do we want to do reach up, or do we want to take a break?
I just wondering.
Was that a motion?
We have the clerks.
I'm concerned for the witnesses.
They've been, this is a very hard, because it's a very emotional place between people and housing and kids and families, you know. All right, let's take 10 minutes.